My father raised his bourbon to the skies and toasted my brother for honoring the stone name at our family celebration. He then stared at me coldly. He told 100 joyful guests that my daughter's choices are hers. They laughed. I grinned. The public finally saw the genuine soldier 10 seconds later, when the TV behind him flashed breaking news. My name is Jordan Blake. I'm 33, an Army Major General. Tonight, my father reminded me that titles mean nothing to the wrong child in this family. Missouri had a humid July evening with the fragrance of hickory-smoked ribs in the air. The 4th of July seemed to have extended itself to our family ranch with patriotic bunting and red checkered tablecloths. The kids played tag between hay bales and outdoor chairs while parents drank Budweiser from dripping bottles. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. A basic flannel shirt, worn pants and base dusty boots were my outfit. I looked odd among the fancy polos, sundresses and polished smiles. Nathan Blake, my older brother, wore a special Navy suit. In the center of the grass, he told Pentagon strategy stories and met senators. People laughed too loudly and nodded too heartily. He was picked. I sought my mother's attention. Margaret, Stone at the buffet, poured mashed potatoes onto Nathan's plate like a sacrifice. I said, "Hey, Mom." She glanced at me, her smile tight and distracted. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered quickly, eyes darting back to Nathan. "Be sure to grab some corn before it's gone." When Dad Richard Blake rose from his chair with a glass of Four Roses bourbon, the yard fell quiet, gathering. I'd like to make a toast. Every head turned, phones dropped, conversations died. He lifted his glass high and looked directly at Nathan. My son, Nathan Blake, carries the Stone family legacy with honor and brilliance. Applause erupted. Whistles, cheers, pride soaked the air like humidity. Then he turned to me. "Carrie." That was it. No name, no glass raised, just a dismissal so sharp it sliced through the cheers like broken glass in a punch bowl. The silence that followed was louder than any explosion I'd heard in combat. Even the crickets stopped. I felt my stomach turn to stone and my breath catch. I stood there, suddenly hyper-aware of every person's gaze shifting awkwardly, of the neighbor's kid's jaw dropping mid-hot dog bite, and of Nathan's smug, the outdoor bar's flat-screen TV, previously playing baseball highlights, flickered and switched to a Fox News special bulletin. The host's voice was somber. "We've just received confirmation from the Department of Defense." My heart stopped. The Pentagon seal filled the screen, then my photo in full Army combat uniform. Global AI counteroffensive. The silence was absolute. No one clapped or cheered. My father's bourbon glass trembled in his hand. The amber liquid shivered with it. His pride in his eyes drained like a faulty dam. I didn't smile or bask in it. I felt nothing. Or rather, I felt too much, a flood of rage, sadness, and vindication, falling. They saw me now, but not as a daughter, only as an anomaly, and no one said a word. As I stood there frozen, my fingers clenched involuntarily around the condensation-slick bottle of water I hadn't realized I was holding. No one looked at me, not my uncles, cousins, or even the neighbor whose son I'd once pulled out of a flipped pickup during a flash flood, with a scrolling headline about my contributions to the International Task Force Against Rogue AI Combat Systems. No one said, "That's incredible." Or "I had no idea," just silence. I turned and walked toward the house, my boots thudding against the wooden porch. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the weight of every year I'd spent fighting. Not just wars abroad, but for breath in my own family. Photos of Nathan at West Point, shaking hands with politicians, and standing with Dad next to a new truck. My face was nowhere. In the kitchen, I stared at the counter. My mother's strawberry pie sat there untouched. I brought it hoping for a moment of warmth, but no one asked who made it. I didn't. I replied barely above a whisper. "I walked." She sighed. "Your father, he didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "He didn't even say my name, Mom." She didn't answer. Just stood there, probably wringing her hands like she did when she couldn't fix something without breaking something else. You don't have to prove anything to us." But I did, and I do, and I think I always will. She stepped closer, but I backed away. I wasn't ready. Not tonight. That's when I knew this wasn't just a bad night. This was the blueprint. This was who they'd always been. I was done asking for space at a table set for success, of disbelief. I'd experienced it at 23, not 33. After the party went quiet, I walked inside like a ghost. Crickets returned outside, and the laughter was gone. I climbed the stairs, groaning under my boots, but no one called after me. The hallway smelled like cedar polish and thyme. I stopped outside the family room, a photo of me on graduation day from airborne school. Sweat on my brow, mud on my uniform. Eyes lit up with pride I hadn't felt in years was gone. In its place, a polished photo of Nathan in a dark gray suit, grinning next to a U.S. senator. I stepped closer. She emerged at the hallway's end with a tray of empty glasses. "Where's my picture?" My voice wasn't furious, it was too flat for that. "Oh," she rushed. "I stored it." Dust was rising. "Put it where?" "Stored. Probably downstairs." "Do not worry," I said. "Like me. Somewhere." She didn't look at me. She disappeared down the steps silently. So 15 minutes later, I was in the attic with a flashlight, climbing into heat and gloom. The creaky door opened to a smelly room with dry wood, old paper, and anything no one wanted, wants to recall. Avoiding low beams required ducking. Dust whirled in my flashlight beam. I looked through boxes of holiday decorations, Nathan's childhood awards, and a container of Thanksgiving linens. It appeared behind a broken rocking horse in a far corner. A damp cardboard box with faded black marker. Jordan's goods. The handwriting was clear. My dad's, capital letters like government equipment labels. I grabbed it and knelt. Brittle tape, the top flaps crunched open. My parts were mixed like rubbish. My first marathon medal worn and tarnished, still on the red, white, blue ribbon. Grandfather Pop gave me a green beret when I was accepted into Special Forces selection. He died 2 weeks later. I received a laminated letter from my battalion commander applauding my decisions during an Afghan convoy ambush. Below that, several shattered plastic G.I. Joe figures, old journals from middle school, and old hoodie from high school. It was a disregard museum. Not one piece carefully put. No packaging, frame, or indication of value. They were my artifacts. I lightly touched the green beret. On the porch swing with his oxygen tank hissing, Pop told me, "You're going to do more than any of them, girl. Mark my words." Think he was right. Still, it was next to a broken toy vehicle and deflated soccer ball. My 82nd Airborne Division Soldier of the Year certificate was half bent and water damaged at the bottom of the box. I got it in 2016. I remembered calling home that day. My pride made it hard to speak. I answered, "Dad, I won it. I really did." They called my name in front of the whole base. He replied like a shopping list. "Good." Nathan was admitted into Georgetown's MBA program. His move to DC is imminent. I must leave. Calls long distance costs money. Click. 30 seconds. A year of effort and sacrifice turned into nothing at that time. Now I saw that distorted paper. I had it in barracks. I laminated it myself. Twisted and curled, it was hidden behind a ripped Batman folder. Sitting on my heels. Attic creaked. I didn't weep. I didn't blink. My heart had grown hard to these tiny betrayals. But something inside me calcified then. A choice or resignation. They never saw me. Inauthentic me. My burden alone. Even my victories were unwanted clutter. I took the medal, beret, and certificate. I softly folded them into my lap and smoothed their edges with my palms. Because I was handling explosives, my fingers moved like that. They were more than things. They were everything I produced that wasn't suitable for exhibition. Matched their story. The house creaked again as heat settled. Someone played music downstairs. Perhaps Nathan's playlist. Vintage rock. I checked the attic again. No one heard me speak. I am not forgotten. The proof you overlooked is me. I carefully closed the box again, as if the past deserved someone to keep it. I put the box at the foot of my childhood bed. Instead of posters, beige was used, walls and a home sweet home sign. I felt like the home attempted to forget I lived there. Sitting on the bed edge, I held the beret on my lap. Clear, precise, unpleasant recollection hit me. I was 16. The night before my first state track meet. The training took months. Dad promised to arrive. He didn't. Nathan received a B+ on a difficult math test that night, so Dad took him out for steak. I stood on the podium with my ribbon and scanned the crowd, hoping he'd arrive late. He didn't. Mom said he worked, sweetie. That's when I discovered his conditional affection. His definition of success made sense to Nathan. Mine never would. Years later, I stood on that unseen podium, ribbon in hand, audience hushed. Except this time, I wouldn't wait for applause. More than any childhood birthday cake, powdered eggs and stale coffee tasted familiar. First years in the service weren't spectacular. I slept in a communal barracks at Fort Bragg that smelled like old boots and industrial cleanser. My food was on plastic trays. My wages barely covered my expenses, but I sent money home. I automatically wired Missouri a piece of my check every month. I thought it was for the house, maybe new windows in the upstairs bedroom that leaked during thunderstorms. Mom would buy groceries, Dad would mend the porch steps. I believed I was assisting, being a good daughter, responsible adult, and soldier who could carry more than her pack. My unit invited me to weekend trips and vacations, but I declined. They went out for beers or Myrtle Beach, but I sat in my room and microwaved dollar ramen, giving my fun money to a family that barely acknowledged me. I declined a 4-day pass to save for my parents, new dishwasher for anniversary. For Nathan to eat porcelain, I ate cardboard. The call followed. On a Sunday afternoon, I had a second cup of coffee and half a Clancy novel chapter. She said, "Mom called while I was folding laundry. Fast and pleasant." She said, "Thanks for the money, honey." His Armani outfit looked great on Nathan. Fit him perfectly. Ideal for New York getaway. Networking was wonderful. You should have seen the images. Seemed confusing at first. I smiled stupidly. Which photos? From the mixer, that Empire Hotel rooftop event. We'd have needed your support with airfare and lodging. My hands froze mid-fold. So the money I sent was used for Nathan's trip? I asked slowly. Well, she hesitated the first time. He needed to seem sharp. These opportunities don't come again. I don't remember anything else. Talk. I probably apologized and hung up. My heart thudded so loudly I could hear it. Room spun slightly. I lived off dollar store goods, skipped replacing my worn boots, and rationed toothpaste at the end of the month. So my golden boy brother could pout and eat in Manhattan. I observed the floor from my bunk's edge for a while. It felt like the room was deoxygenated. Something snapped then. Not angry, no drama, just closure. I never informed them. I stopped sending money. No explanation, no fight, just silence. Another call came weeks later. My father. Jordan barked. When did you become selfish and stop supporting your family? Would you consider yourself too good for us? Phone was a couple inches from my ear. His authoritative voice made me feel like I owed him a report. Returning it to my mouth, I said calmly, "I'm just, sir, learning from the finest." I hung up. I had never drawn a boundary before. No arguments, no rebuttals, just a quiet wall constructed from every disregarded sacrifice. Clarity, not revenge. A General Patton quote appeared years later. Accept challenges to enjoy victory. War wasn't the challenge that day. It was understanding when to stop giving to pipeline seekers. I stopped buying steak dinners for a man who never asked if I was eating. The oddest aspect was no one followed up. No one questioned why money stopped. No apology or acknowledgement, just a void where expectation was. Started with guilt. I woke up at night believing they were suffering. Maybe I punished them too much. But I'd recall Mom saying Armani like a magic word. How Dad's voice was accusatory rather than kind. Guilt faded swiftly. Starting treating myself. Nothing fancy, just dignity. Real winter clothing, good mattress. A weekend cabin vacation with squad mates was my treat. Grilled burgers in the cold after splitting a 6-pack. This was my first laugh in months. I hid the alteration. It wasn't necessary. No one asked about my life, only what I could provide them. That's when I realized silence isn't weakness. It's armor. This is strategy. Sometimes silence is stronger. Silence was my uniform. My father's final words lingered in my ears. Think you're too good for this family? I was never asked if I was okay. Never pondered how I kept turning up. My silence continued throughout my following chapter. I finally experienced real family. It began in a windowless Pentagon room during a top intelligence briefing. I was one of the young, only one woman in uniform and police in the room. Other generals and professional analysts wore iron suits and gray hair. A counterinsurgency map of Middle Eastern enemy supply channels was created from months of field data and sleepless nights. All except one did not like my slides. Coffee in hand, Colonel Dana Ross sat in the rear, her eyes sharp beneath narrow glasses. After the meeting concluded and most men gave generic criticism, she stayed behind and approached me, offered me fresh black coffee and added, "You've got a strategic mind. Most people spend 3 decades trying to build." I blinked. "Thank you, ma'am. Don't let them reduce you to a parachute and a pretty salute," she said, leaving. My first sense of being seen. Not as a stone or a woman attempting to match her brother, but as Jordan's soldier, thinker, leader. Later that year, we deployed to Karingal Valley, Afghanistan. The locals called it the Valley of Death for good cause. One night we were hit. Ridgeline ambush. Shots rang out in the cold. We were told to retreat immediately. Sergeant Cole Matry was pinned down and bleeding behind a big crag. Severely injured leg. They considered leaving him behind due to danger. Despite the dust, I saw faith in his eyes. I barked, "Breaking formation, cover me." Low crawling and pushing Cole inch by inch, I led 2 men through open fire to rescue him. That Cole was sleepy from morphine at night in the field hospital, sitting on his cot edge. He split a smashed chocolate bar in 2 from his vest and gave me the bigger piece. "Thanks for not leaving me, Major," he muttered. I grinned. "You would have done the same." He trembled slowly. "Unlike others, you did." The chalk-tasting, half-melted bar is still the best thing I've ever eaten. I eventually realized family wasn't who reared you, who appeared in the flames. Early mornings started with unpleasant instant coffee and exhausted teammates who inquired if you were well despite not sleeping. The hush after a failed mission when someone squeezed your shoulder without speaking. The unspoken agreement. "When you can't, I'll carry you." They gave me that. My real family couldn't. The letter to my APO was handwritten in my familiar harsh, haughty style. "Too well, Nathan." Hope briefly crossed my mind. Maybe he changed. Maybe he cared now. But no. He wrote to request a favor. He requested an invitation to the DC U.S. Army Association Gala. Was hoping to pull some strings as a senior officer. No one asked if I was okay. Another request, transaction. I carefully folded the letter and deposited it in the burn barrel beside our tent. In an instant, it brightened and vanished. That Cole gave me another chocolate bar at night. "Mail call," he half grinned. I nodded. We laughed at junk mail. It was then I knew. I didn't have to keep looking for a seat at the Stone family table because I had one in the ground amid folks who wouldn't let me walk alone. First time I didn't feel like a burden. Feeling at home. Eva took me aside before another mission briefing later that week. She regarded me intently. "Then, Stone leadership isn't about rank. It's about who still follows you when the bullets stop flying." I added, "It's sometimes the only explanation." The girl smiled barely. "You've got it. Don't waste it chasing ghosts." My former life had become ghosts. People that previously mattered are now shadows in my rearview mirror. And I stopped looking back. We often gathered at the comms tent late at night, hunched over metal cups and comments that only made sense to others who have faced the same barrel. We shared grief, silence, stories. I belonged there. Mud boots and worn hands that could carry weight, not pristine paintings in living rooms. This was my chosen family, not blood. And that changed everything. Monday morning began as usual. As I entered my Pentagon office with coffee in hand and damp boots, raining outdoors. Already a war zone in my inbox. Just halfway through a briefing, my phone buzzed once, twice, then nonstop. Something was off. I looked up. A few coworkers stared at me from the corridor. Concerned, not curious. Eva Rotova got to my door. No words, just stare. The break room was nodded to. My cousin Caleb Morgan, in full West Point regalia, was on Fox and Friends morning show. His hair was exquisite, his grin modest. He was being introduced as an Operation Iron Echo genius. "My operation," he stated slowly and reverently, as if recalling age-related trauma. "I made the hardest decision ever," he replied, trembling. "We were losing AO control. Had to intervene. We resisted. We won despite losing life. I was immobilized," he said, "from radio directives to terrain layout to enemy retreat. Exclusively in that room events known. Just me." He paused and gasped, as if the performance needed an Oscar. I remember our fallen men's faces. We left no one behind. Single tear fell from his cheek. Under her breath, Eva cursed. "He quotes your debriefing notes." I remained silent. I couldn't. As America was lied to, I watched. No misquote, a hijacking. I was wiped and replaced. Once the part ended, I stepped. I called my dad from the hallway. He recovered after one ring. Like nothing had happened, Jordan said. You seen the interview? I requested. Sure, he said. Caleb excelled and was confident. Country needs heroes like him. My throat tightened. That was my surgery. He stole my work and choices. He sighed. Look, I instructed him to proceed. He needed a future boost. It improves family image. You're general. What's wrong with sharing the spotlight? Some sharing. He took it. You're thinking only of yourself. Jordan, don't let pride cloud your judgment. Ego. I nearly dropped the phone. This wasn't treachery to him. Strategy and brand, and I was a pawn in the Stone family's legacy campaign. Goodbye, Dad, I murmured, hanging up. Static filled my consciousness as I stood in the corridor for a few minutes. Again my phone buzzed. A colleague forwarded me a link to a reputable military blog's recent post. Iron Echo ascending title, Military Intelligence Star. A shot of Caleb with his Academy ring and Cum-Nation badge was cropped perfectly. The story hailed his brilliant tactical instincts and quoted Pentagon insiders, who validated his gallantry throughout the operation. No name needed for sources. I recognized the sentence cadence and quote shape. My brother Nathan, the public affairs star, planted this narrative. He used the media to hide credit and inflate fiction. He helped more than Caleb. His narrative was manufactured. Read it again. One phrase stood out. Lieutenant Vance acted boldly while senior officers hesitated. Not just a falsehood. A dagger. I closed the laptop and tightened my hands. My every sacrifice, scar, restless night, and lost buddy became a PR stunt. By my family, not the adversary. These men were supposed to protect me. My father once labeled me a burden. By the brother who never considered me more, rather than a spotlight threat. By a cousin who shed kerosene tears on national television. I sat alone in my flat with the TV off that night. I stared at the ceiling and thought, this is my battle now. Not the kind fought in deserts. The kind where truth is a liability, silence is permission, and family is a weapon. I thought the battlefield was behind me, but it had just moved indoors. A memo arrived the next morning. Comments, confirmations, sound bites. Caleb's name was trending. The blog post had been picked up by other military news sites, and I had become a ghost in my own story. Eva walked into my office with 2 coffees. She sat one down in front of me without a word. Then she sat across from me and looked me dead in the eyes. Burden. You let them take your money, credit, dignity. But this, she tapped the desk. This is my battle now. I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter, strong, and burned on the way down. I'm done being quiet, I said. She nodded. Then let's get loud. I opened my laptop and started gathering every shred of evidence I had. Storm, I'd give them a hurricane. Not just for me, but for every woman who sat in a war room and was told her brilliance was just a nice accessory, and every soldier whose silence was mistaken for surrender. I wasn't erased. I was loading. The email arrived at 0700 sharp. Subject line: suspension pending security review priority. I stared at it for 10 seconds before opening. I was suspended from duty pending an investigation into a potential security breach involving classified drone reconnaissance data. My breath caught. They accused me of leaking military intel. 15 years in uniform, no violations, no strikes, no missed reviews. And they sent it on my enlistment anniversary, July 8, 0600 Fort Jackson. Coincidence? No. Precision. Bottom wasn't real, but I recognized the alias MJR Delta, a ghost signature used by high clearance staff. Only a few people could authorize this kind of action, including General Adrian Consincade, who hated me since the Kabul intel shakeup. I exposed a flaw in his drone command model, costing him 2 contracts and a promotion. Now he was supporting Caleb, my cousin, who stole my operation. Around the mouse. They weren't just trying to silence me, they were going to bury me. I sat motionless in my empty office as DC traffic droned like nothing had changed. Inside me something snapped. Not like a twig, but like steel under pressure. The kind of break you don't hear until it's irreversible. For years I'd stayed quiet. Story in his mouth, I swallowed it. But this wasn't family politics. This was eraser. Institutional, deliberate, coordinated. I leaned back in my chair, fluorescent light buzzing above me, and I remembered a TED Talk I'd watched during my third tour. Nee Brown said, "Vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage." I never wanted to be vulnerable, but now I had no choice. To the window and decided. I wasn't going to hide or beg. They wanted a war. They picked the wrong soldier. Instead of calling legal, I pulled out my secure line, which had one number programmed into it. It rang once, twice, then a voice answered. "I was wondering when you'd call, General." "Spectre," I said, my voice still flat. I didn't sleep that night. I wrote not a resignation, a war map, and a list of every officer who could have authorized the fake report and every known alias tied to Conincade. I dug through old comm logs, pulled favor ST, CENTCOM, and sent encrypted pings to former comrades who owed me more than drinks. By Oro 300, Spectre sent back his first hit. A shell server in Arlington pinged from an IP inside the Pentagon. Sloppy, arrogant, typical. By morning I had a dossier, names, timelines, login, and a terrifying realization. Soldier who'd been quietly pushed aside. Every woman who was labeled too emotional after speaking truth. Every enlisted man whose ideas were stolen by a superior with better connections. This was bigger than Jordan Blake. This was rot, and rot spreads unless you cut it out. Some of you listening know exactly what this feels like. The next day my access badge was revoked, and I was escorted out of the Pentagon like a criminal. No announcement, no chance to speak, just a quiet walk past people who used to nod at me in the hallway. Eva Rostova was waiting outside. She handed me a manila envelope with ho. She handed me notes from the last intel briefing, time-stamped, initialed, and highlighted, saying, "I see you." It was more than my family had ever done. I nodded, whispered, "Thank you," and left. By nightfall, I had moved my operations to a secure workspace in an underground server farm outside DC. We set up dual screens, live comms, and encryption layers the NSA would blink at. Truth. He just grinned. "Whatever helps you sleep, General." But I didn't sleep. Not yet. Because I knew the storm hadn't peaked. It was just beginning. Arlington, Virginia. One of Spectre's many nests. He worked like a machine. No music, coffee, or unnecessary words. Just the rhythm of fingers across keys and the occasional curse. "Find." He pointed to a screen. Logan events traced to a static node inside Concencade's office. Military IP, not a proxy. I exhaled sharply and short. So, he didn't just approve the suspension, he executed the breach. Spectre nodded. And it gets better. He brought up an encrypted email string. Subject line: Renarrative Coordination Operation Iron Echo. Spectre decrypted the body. In exchange for public cooperation with media exposure, you will be granted a classified clearance slot in Military Intelligence Command contingent on public engagement outcomes. I closed my eyes and thought about it. Sarah Jennings, investigative journalist and sister of Sergeant Cole Matry, messaged me directly. "We need to talk. I've got something on Nathan." I met Sarah at a diner off I-395. Vinyl booths, bad coffee, and better privacy. She was already there flipping through a small notebook. I started digging after what happened to Cole. She clicked play. "My sister." Nathan's voice. Smooth, casual. "She's got medals, sure, but don't confuse luck for talent. The real skill is knowing how to shape the narrative." Sarah paused the recording. "I also have a source, junior staffer. He overheard Nathan saying the whole Caleb campaign was a cleanup job for your PR." Sarah pushed a folder across the table. Inside were prints, journalist communications, metadata from the stories, IPs, timestamps, and evidence of pre-written quotes. "They planned it all weeks in advance," she said before Caleb went on Fox and Friends. Story out of the picture. I left the diner with shaking hands and a folder full of betrayal. Back in Arlington, Spectre looked up when I entered. "Check this," he said. A new screen appeared. "You recognize this email address?" I blinked. It was my father's Gmail. Spectre said he's never been careful. Behavioral patterns, Jordan. I sat down slowly. Kellen had asked for psychological context and my father provided it. He wrote about me in third person. Jordan has always been volatile under pressure. She resents male authority. Prone to outbursts and idealistic rigidity. May require monitoring for long-term leadership stability. That night I sat alone in the dim light of Spectre's bunker. Folder in one hand, black coffee in the other. Sarah's evidence was solid, Spectre's data airtight. The threads were cleaved. Strategy wasn't about emotion. It was about timing. I opened a worn notebook from command school and wrote a quote on the inside cover in red ink. Know thy enemy, know thyself, and in 100 battles, you will never be defeated. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. I turned the page and began outlining Phase 1. We wouldn't go public until the foundation was rotted enough to crumble. Spectre prepared the packet. Sarah prepared a press teaser. I started rehearsing a different kind of mission briefing. One where my weapon wasn't firepower but evidence. One where the battlefield wasn't foreign soil but live broadcast. For the first time in weeks, I slept not out of exhaustion but resolve. Adrian Kellen sat on the front row in his full dress uniform, metal armor across his chest. To his left was Nathan, polished, pressed, unreadable. Next to him was Caleb Morgan, clearly coached, clearly smug. I walked in through the center doors, spine straight in my ceremonial blues. Allegations. The floor is yours. I nodded once and adjusted the mic. For 15 years I served this country in silence. I planned missions, protected lives, and accepted the cost of wearing this uniform. I never asked for recognition. I only asked for truth. But truth, it seems, was inconvenient. I paused. The room didn't breathe. Large screen behind me. It was Fox and Friends Caleb describing the Iron Echo mission, polished, scripted, and full of drama. Then I played the mission audio. Black box feed from our operation in the field. My voice barking orders, coordinating airstrikes, and saving Sergeant Matri's team under live fire. There was no Caleb, only me. I nodded again, but Kincaid wasn't alone. Another slide showed email exchanges between Kincaid and Caleb. Promises of a future military intelligence position tied to Caleb's public cooperation. He was bribed to lie for a career. I saw Caleb glance sideways, his hands fidgeting. Let's move on to Nathan Stone. Then came the final blow. I want to turn your attention to this correspondence, I said, my voice razor sharp. Up came the email string from my father, Richard, General Kellen. No encryption, just cold, precise language. Jordan has always shown volatile emotional patterns. Resists male leadership. Prone to insubordination, cloaked in moral righteousness. I let the words hang. He didn't defend me. He armed my enemies. General Stone, are you saying the suspension was retaliation? I replied that it was theater. And they forgot who taught drama in this war. The room cracked. Some quiet chuckles from press. The rest still stunned. I closed my folder and faced General Kincaid. I turned to Nathan. You weaponized the media because you didn't have the guts to confront me in person. That's your legacy. And finally, to my father. You once told me leadership wasn't about glory. It was about sacrifice. I guess you forgot that when you sacrificed your daughter for a dinner invitation. I stepped back from the mic. I turned and walked out, head high. War won. I didn't go home after the hearing. I went straight to the reflecting pool in front of the cap, took off my gloves, and stared at the glassy surface like it might crack from the weight of everything that had just happened. Ava Rotova called. I didn't answer. We both knew what this moment meant. That evening, Spectre sent me a message. It's done. Press picked up the footage trending in under 12 minutes. Caleb just deleted his social media. I didn't smile, not out of bitterness, but because justice isn't joy, it's relief. I walked back to the secure Arlington flat where I'd lived for weeks. She looked up from her keyboard. It's already reaching networks, she said. You're dubbed the General of Truth. You know that? She said it's overdue. We didn't toast or cheer. We just sat in the calm. I opened my notebook again and wrote one sentence on a clean page. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Cleaning out rot doesn't stop with one room. The next morning I woke before sunrise. Instinct. The kind you sharpen in war zones when every breath before dawn feels like borrowed time. I sat with black coffee and my father's last email still in my mind. He hadn't apologized, retracted, or followed up. Silence was its own admission. A junior officer at Fort Bragg sent a new message. Ma'am, just wanted you to know everyone here is watching and we're proud, one line. That's when I realized this wasn't about one hearing or one career, but about what we normalize, excuse, and challenge. I folded the email and slid it into the front pocket of my notebook, which held every strategy one had written since this war turned political. Phase 2 wouldn't be about vengeance but reconstruction. I arrived early not because I was eager, but because I needed time to breathe before he showed up. I found the bench he mentioned in the email, halfway between the footbridge and the boathouse. It was quiet, shielded from joggers and morning strollers. The river moved slowly beside us, holding its breath. My father came 6 minutes late, looking smaller and slower. He noticed his shoulders were sagging. "Jordan," he said quietly. I nodded rather than stand. I wanted to say I'm sorry, but his tone was airy and without conviction. "For what?" I said, still watching the river. "For all of it, I suppose," he muttered. I thought I was defending the river. I turned to him and said, "Legacy. A web of lies, control, and betrayal wrapped in a family crest." He winced but said nothing. "I've spent most of my adult life trying to prove myself worthy of your name," I said. He tried again, this time with the weary paternal gentleness that worked on me as a youngster. "Whatever happened, I'm still yours, Father." I shook my head. "You stopped being my father the day you chose strategy over honesty. When you gave away parts of me to protect a legacy I never believed in. When you tried to erase me and called it love." I took the old house key from my coat pocket and set it on the bench between us. "Goodbye, Mr. Stone." A week later, headlines rolled out like dominoes. General Marcus Kellen retired with disgrace. No ceremony, no salute. Caleb Morgan was expelled from West Point. The Academy issued a rare public statement citing ethical violations. Nathan was reassigned to a quiet base in Montana. He didn't call. Staff said over a secure line, "The president would like to offer you a formal promotion and a new strategic advisor role at the White House." "I'm honored," I added. "But I'm not interested in a new rank." The line became quiet, then a gentle, "We respect that." That evening, Eva Rostova and I sat on her Arlington townhouse's back patio. She poured 2 bourbons and a little fire in the stone pit between us. "You did it," she said. "No," I responded. "It's different." She nodded. "You're staying?" I glanced at the cloudless, boundless night sky and answered, "No. I've seen rot with stars on its shoulders. I want to develop something different." She raised her glass to burn unserviceable things. I clinked mine against hers, to planting something better in its ashes. We sat there in silence. No plans, no strategies, just breathing. For the first time in years, I wasn't fighting, chasing approval, or pretending I was okay. I was free. The next morning, I opened my small leather-bound journal, which had been with me every deployment. Look like when constructed on truth? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew the old answers, those handed down by my father, the institution, and the silent code of duty above all, were done. On that afternoon, I contacted Jax, who was already working on a new project. An anonymous, encrypted, ironclad digital archive for defense whistleblowers. Later that day, I visited Sergeant Colamatri, now in rehab after another surgery. Despite his pain, he smiled when he saw me. "You took down giants," he said. I shook my head. "In truth," he nodded. "Same thing." Before I left, he handed me a cloth-wrapped unit patch, faded and scorched. He said, "I want you to have it because you didn't leave me behind ever." I wrote, "Let them inherit ashes," in my notepad while sitting at the window that night. I'll inherit clarity. I didn't go back to the Pentagon. I went home. Not to the Stone family farm, which I had left behind with the old key and the ghosts that never let go. Instead, I bought a small piece of land on the edge of Jefferson County, Missouri, with oak trees and open sky. Close enough to rebuild something honest. I founded the Stone Institute for Honorable Leadership to reclaim the word stone. Not for legacy but for foundation. The Institute became a sanctuary, not of silence but of voice, where young officers, returning veterans, and civilian leaders learned the kind of strength that doesn't shout, but holds. We taught combat ethics, humanitarian strategy, and mental resilience. But its moral weight. What it takes to keep your humanity intact when everything around you asks you to surrender it. Some days were hard. These lecture halls reminded me of my own reflection a decade ago. Tight-jawed, closed-hearted, trying not to drown in invisible wounds. But then someone would stay after class, ask a question, cry, laugh, or tell a story, and healing would begin, not from me, but from the space we'd made together. My mother arrived while I was kneeling in the memorial garden pulling out winter weeds. She didn't say anything, just crouched beside me and picked up the towel I'd set aside. We worked in silence, not empty but willing. When the last flower bed was cleared, she reached into her coat pocket and placed my first marathon medal in my palm. Waiting. I'm sorry, she whispered. I wasn't brave. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just closed my fingers around the metal and nodded. I wasn't forgiving her for the past. I was forgiving myself for carrying it so long. Weeks passed. Classes grew. Applications tripled. New lecture. Not about victory or medals, but about betrayal, loss, and how those things, if faced with courage, can shape the kind of leader no school can create. I opened class the next morning without preamble. What makes a leader worth following? I asked. Silence. Then stories came about broken commands, saved lives, mentors who failed, and moments they could have given in but didn't. I walked the perimeter of the land that night, after everyone had gone. The stars were clear above Missouri, unbothered by memory, untethered from bloodlines. I thought not about battles or hearings or betrayals, but about the simple rhythm of rebuilding, of mornings that began with black coffee and, behind the lecture hall, of planting something that would last longer than I did. I kept a stack of worn copies of Marcus Aurelius Seneca and Epictetus in my office. Most had notes from my time in Kabul, Seoul, and Arlington. I taught from them not as doctrine, but as an invitation to examine, choose, and live with principle when applause and rank were gone. Does anyone know when to stop fighting? I thought about my father, Caleb, Nathan, the battlefield, boardroom, and Senate floor. When the battle costs you more than the wound, I said. When you realize peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of alignment. She didn't write that down. She just nodded. That told me she understood. I wasn't building a legacy of power. I was building a place for truth to breathe. Enough. If you've stuck with me, thank you. This wasn't just a story about betrayal and power. It was about choosing who we become after the ashes. Maybe like me, you've carried wounds others never saw. Maybe you're still rebuilding. I hope Jordan's journey reminded you that truth, when spoken, can heal.